In Revelations, it says something profound. He says, you overcome the enemy by your ability to exegete Scripture. Is that what it says? No. You overcome the enemy by your ability to write a theological dissertation and get a PhD. Is that what it says? No. It says you overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. The power of your story. Society is shaped not by theologians, not by academics. Did you know that? The people in the ivory tower, they're not the ones that are causing our kids to think about themselves in certain ways. You know who shapes society? People who tell the best story. It's universal. The artists, the greatest painters that are timeless, all of them could communicate a story visually. The great photographers, the great movie makers, the great literary writers, even the newscasters. Did you ever notice people in the news win Pulitzer Prizes not because they can explain to you and I the particular economic theories of socialism or capitalism? That's not win Pulitzers. They win prizes because they can communicate stories effectively that communicate those points. Across the board, even the politicians, the ones that win elections are usually the ones that tell the best story. Right? The greatest presidents, for instance, in our country's history were always the ones that could tell the best story. And you know what that does? That just illustrates the power of Scripture. If you have ever read the New Testament, right? You know all those red letters that appear in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in most of our Bibles? Read the red letters once in a while. Those are red because some brilliant printer decided that the words of Jesus deserve special treatment, and so he printed them in red ink instead of black ink. Make it easier for the rest of us. Read the words that are recorded that Jesus spoke, and you'll find that very does he start theologizing, right? Theologizing, right? Very rarely does he theologize. Very rarely does he exegete. I hate that word. That word sounds like, I don't know, my stomach should be doing flips or something, right? Seminarians, for some reason, love to use the word exegete, like the rest of us know what that means, right? He didn't exegete stuff. He would tell a story. You know what I'm talking about? You read his passage, the way he preached. How many 3-point sermons does the Bible record Jesus giving? Not one in my Bible. Now, you wouldn't know that based on how we do church in our country, but he never gave a 3-point sermon with a couple of illustrations thrown in for good measure. He would talk, and he was even more baffling. He wouldn't even explain his stories. His disciples used to get frustrated with him. They were like, Jesus, what did that story mean about the farmer and the seeds? And why can't you tell people? They just get frustrated. They come and hear you preach, and they walk around scratching their head because they don't know the point, right? And what would Jesus say inevitably? He would say, let him who has ears to hear the message. What was he saying by saying that? He was telling a story, right? And his story was, if God is speaking to your heart, the power of your story is going to be enough to impact somebody's life. That's going to be a lot more effective. And how does that play out in your own life, right? Your testimony is your story. How many of you have been to the movies even one time this summer? A couple of you? Just a few? I would bet at least half of you, perhaps all of you who've been to the movies have seen at least one sequel. Right? Maybe it was Ocean's 13 or Shrek 3 or Spider-Man 52 or, right? We've all, Fantastic Four was a sequel this year. Even the horror flicks, there are no original horror ideas. They're all sequels this summer too. There's so many sequels, right? Well, think about your life. If a movie is a story and your life is a story, when somebody meets you for the first time, do they want the sequel? Right? What is the story of your life as you interact with them? When you come in contact with somebody for 5 minutes, do they want to hang with you for another 5? Or are they happy to see you go when you leave? Because if they're happy to see you go, you didn't overcome the enemy. Right? We overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb, who gives us grace, who transforms us by the saving act of Calvary, right? The blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, the impact of our life.